birthday cake, not about the cake itself, about whether the icing should be lemon or chocolate. Nora wanted lemon, Elise wanted chocolate. They laughed about it. They promised to decide later. They never did. There was no final argument, no betrayal, no terrible secret, no message that said, "I never want to see you again." There was simply a Tuesday when Elise didn't answer, then a week, then a month. And eventually Nora realized something that frightened her more than losing a friend in anger. She couldn't remember exactly when they had stopped being friends. For 15 years, Nora had believed friendships ended with doors slamming. She was wrong. Sometimes they ended so quietly that you kept leaving the light on for someone who had already gone. Nora and Elise had met at 21. They were standing in the queue outside a university library when Nora dropped an entire folder of papers onto the floor. Elise helped pick them up. "You've put these in the wrong order," she said. Nora looked at her. "Excuse me." Elise held up 3 pages. "Your entire life is out of sequence." Nora laughed. That was how it began, not with a grand moment, just 3 pages in the wrong order. After that, they became inseparable. They shared cheap coffee, late night walks, bad dates, first jobs, terrible flatmates, families, the kind of conversations that lasted until sunrise because neither person wanted to be the first to say goodnight. They knew each other's habits. Nora knew Elise hated being called when she was upset. Elise knew Nora always said "I'm fine" twice when she wasn't. They had a joke that they would grow old together, not romantically, just together, 2 old women sitting in a cafe, complaining about the weather and judging strangers. They even bought a small blue notebook. On their first page, they wrote, "Things we will do together someday." The list began with simple things: a road trip, a seaside holiday, a weekend in Paris. Then it became ridiculous: learn Italian, open a bookshop, buy matching yellow raincoats, have dinner at the same restaurant every year until they were 80. They wrote everything down because at 21, the future felt like something you could schedule. They didn't know yet how easily life could rearrange itself. The first thing that changed was not the friendship, it was the distance. Elise got a job in another city, just 2 hours away, nothing dramatic. They promised it wouldn't matter. For a while it didn't. Every Sunday they spoke on the phone, then every other Sunday, then whenever one of them remembered. Their messages became shorter. "How are you?" "Busy." "You?" "Same." "Speak soon." They always meant it. That was the problem. Neither of them was lying. They really did intend to speak soon, but soon is a dangerous word. It can mean tomorrow. It can mean next week. Sometimes it quietly becomes 3 years. Nora began noticing the small changes. Elise stopped sending photographs. Nora stopped telling her about ordinary things. The tiny details disappeared first. The neighbor's new dog, the strange man at the supermarket, the burnt dinner, the book Nora hated, nothing important. And perhaps that was why nobody noticed they were losing each other. Important things are easy to remember. It's the ordinary things that build a life. One winter, Nora's mother became ill. Nora didn't tell Elise immediately, not because she didn't trust her, because she knew Elise was struggling too. A new job, a difficult relationship, a father recovering from surgery. Nora looked at the message she had typed. "My mom isn't doing very well." She stared at it, then deleted it. She would tell Elise later. Later became after the appointment, then after the hospital visit, then after things settled down. But things didn't settle down, and Elise never knew. Months later, Elise sent Nora a photograph of a restaurant. "We should finally go here." Nora looked at the picture. She wanted to tell her everything. Instead, she wrote, "Definitely." That was all. Elise replied with a heart. Nora put the phone down. She would tell her tomorrow. She didn't. The friendship had not broken. It had become a room where both women kept postponing the conversation they needed to have. But neither realized the other was waiting. A year passed, then 2. Nora's mother recovered. Elise's relationship ended. Both women survived things the other knew almost nothing about, and that was the strange part. They were still friends. At least technically their birthdays were remembered. Christmas messages were exchanged. Occasionally one would write, "We really need to catch up," and the other would answer, Absolutely, but the words had become ceremonial, like saying we should get coffee to someone you meet in a supermarket. Then, one spring morning, Nora found the blue notebook. It was inside a box she had forgotten about. She opened it. The handwriting was theirs, Messiel Young. Certain the list was still there. Road trip, Paris bookshop, Yeddo raincoats. Nora smiled. Then she noticed something. At the bottom of the page, written years later in different ink, was a sentence. She didn't remember writing it. We keep saying someday. Nora stared at it. She turned the page. There was nothing else. Then she found a second note. This one wasn't hers. It said, maybe someday already happened. Nora stopped breathing. Elise had written it. But when and why? Nora searched through the notebook. The pages held small memories, a cinema ticket, a receipt from a cafe, a pressed flower, a train ticket from the day Elise moved away. Then she found an envelope. Inside was a photograph took at 21. Standing outside the university library, Nora holding the papers she had dropped, Elise holding the 3 pages she had rescued. On the back, Elise had written, "This is where everything started." Below it was another sentence. "I hope we don't become strangers." Nora sat on the floor. The sentence hurt more than she expected, because Elise had been afraid of exactly what had happened. Not a fight, not betrayal. Strangers, slowly, quickly, without anyone choosing it. Nora called Elise. The number still worked. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, then voicemail. Nora nearly hung up, but instead she said hi. Her voice sounded strange. "Are you free sometimes?" Silence. Nora almost laughed. 15 years of friendship, and she couldn't think of anything better to say. Then she added, "I found the notebook." The line remained silent, and then Elise said, "Oh," just that one word, but Nora heard something inside it. Not indifference, something else, something she couldn't name. Something odd. They met the following Saturday, the same bakery, not because they planned it, because neither of them could remember where else to go. Nora arrived early. She ordered coffee, then changed her mind, then ordered tea. When Elise walked in, Nora recognized her immediately, and yet for one strange second, she felt as though she were looking at someone she had once known very well. They hugged. It lasted 2 seconds, maybe 3, then they sat down. Nora placed the blue notebook on the table. Elise looked at it. "Does it still have the list?" "Yes." "Did we ever do any of it?" Nora smiled. "Some which ones?" Nora thought. "The road trip." Elise looked surprised. "Did we? You don't remember?" "No." Nora laughed softly. "You got food poisoning." Elise stared. Then she laughed. "I do remember." And suddenly they were 23 again. For a few minutes the years disappeared. They remembered the road, the broken car, the terrible motel, the rain, the argument over directions. The fact that they had nearly killed each other over a paper map. They laughed, really laughed, and Nora realized something. The friendship hadn't disappeared. The friendship was still there. But the people who had created it had changed. That was the truth. Neither woman had known how to say. They had spent years trying to return to a version of their friendship that no longer existed, and every failed attempt made them feel like they had failed each other. But they hadn't. They had simply grown in different directions. Still, Nora had one question, the one she had been afraid to ask. "Why did you stop calling?" Elise looked down, and suddenly the laughter was gone. "Helderia, I thought you were busy." Nora blinked. "What? You were always busy. So were you." "I know." They looked at each other, and then Elise said, "Your mother was sick." Nora's heart stopped. "How did you know?" "I saw you at the hospital." Nora stared. "When?" "Years ago." "Why didn't you say anything?" Elise looked embarrassed. "Because I thought you didn't want me to." Nora felt something inside her collapse. "I was waiting for you to ask. I was waiting for you to tell me." Neither spoke, and there it was, the invisible space between them, not created by anger, created by politeness, by hesitation. By 2 people trying so hard not to burden each other that they accidentally became strangers. Elise looked at the notebook. "I thought you had moved on," Nora whispered. "I thought you had." They both. But this time, the laughter carried sadness, because they finally understood. They hadn't drifted apart because they stopped caring. They had drifted apart because they cared in ways that became silence. Nora had thought giving Elise space was kindness. Elise had thought staying quiet was respect. Both had been trying to protect the friendship. Both had been trying to protect it, and somehow, that protection had come the thing that starved it. They spent 3 hours in the bakery, not repairing everything. That would have been too simple. They talked about the years they had missed. Some things were painful, some were funny, some were too late to change. Elise told Nora about the relationship she had hidden, the one that had left her afraid to trust anyone. Nora told Elise about the nights she had sat beside her mother in hospital. They discovered how much of each other's lives had happened outside the friendship. It was strange. They had known each other for 15 years, and yet there were entire chapters they had never read. Before leaving, Nora opened the notebook. She looked at the old list: the road trip to Dunt, Paris, never bookshop, never Yeddo raincoats. Still ridiculous. Then she took a pen. She crossed out the words, "Things we will do together someday." Elise watched. "What are you doing?" Nora smiled. "I think we've been waiting for someday to rescue us." She turned the page. On the next blank sheet, she wrote, "Things we can still choose." Then she handed the pen to Elise. Elise stared at it for a long moment. She didn't write anything. Then she added, "Coffee next month." Nora laughed. "That's your big plan." "Let's not get ambitious." Nora wrote underneath, "No promises about next month." Elise looked at her. "That's a terrible friendship." "No." Nora closed the notebook. "It's an honest one." Haltherabras. They didn't become inseparable again. That was the surprising part. They didn't suddenly start speaking every day. They didn't recreate their 20s. They didn't pretend 15 years hadn't happened. Instead, they became something new. Sometimes they met, sometimes months passed. But now, when something mattered, they said so. When Nora's mother died, Elise came. Not because Nora asked, because Nora told her. When Elise lost her job, Nora called. Not because she sensed something was wrong, because Elise said, "I need my friend." The words were simple, but they changed everything, because friendship, they discovered, isn't always maintained by constant closeness. Sometimes it is maintained by refusing to let silence speak for you. Years later, Nora found the blue notebook again. The pages had become soft. The corners were bent. The list was almost unreadable. She turned to the final page. There was something new. Elise had written it. "We didn't lose each other underneath. We just stopped knowing how to find each other." Nora read it twice. Then she added one final sentence, "and eventually we learned to ask." She closed the notebook. The bakery outside her window was busy. People were coming and going, some carrying flowers, some carrying bread, some carrying nothing at all. Nora thought about the two young women who had once believed friendship meant never drifting. They had been wrong. People drift, life pulls, children arrive, Pennicrents grow old, jobs change, cities change. People become versions of themselves their friends have never met. The real tragedy isn't drifting. The tragedy is believing that distance automatically means the end. Sometimes the person you miss is sitting on the other side of the same silence, waiting for you to speak first. And sometimes, after years of wondering who walked away, you discover nobody did. You were both simply waiting for the other person to say, "I noticed, I remember, I still care." The blue notebook remained on Nora's shelf. The original list was still there. Paris never happened. The bookshop never opened. The matching yellow raincoats remained an absurd dream, but the notebook no longer represented everything they had failed to do. It represented something more important. Proof that a friendship doesn't have to remain exactly as it was to remain real. Some friendships are loud, some are constant, and some become quiet for a while, not because they meant nothing, but because life became louder than the people who once mattered most. The important thing is knowing that silence isn't always a goodbye. Sometimes it's just a pause. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's pride. Sometimes it's two people waiting for permission to be honest. Nora and Elise never returned to the friendship they had at 21. They didn't need to. That friendship belonged to two young women who believed the future would always wait for them. The friendship they built later belonged to two women who finally understood something different. Nothing waits forever. Not time, not people, not love, not friendship. But some things, if they are real enough, can survive the years when we don't know how to hold them. The last time Nora and Elise argued about the cake, Nora chose lemon. Elise chose chocolate. This time, they ordered both, and as they sat together, laughing over two plates neither of them could finish, Nora looked across the table and realized something. There had been no dramatic moment when they became friends again. No single apology. No perfect explanation. Just two people who finally stopped pretending that distance meant indifference. Sometimes a friendship doesn't end with a fight. Sometimes it simply gets quiet. And sometimes years later, someone opens an old notebook, finds a sentence written by a younger version of the person they miss, as Ed decides to make one more call, not because the past can be restored, but because the future is still unwritten. And somewhere between the things they never did and the things they still might, two old friends found each other again, not where they had left off, but exactly where they were.